A knife flew across a luxury Miami penthouse. It went 3 inches into a man's chest, pierced a major artery. And the woman who threw it called 911 and whispered, "Baby, I'm so sorry." Then she told police she was the victim. Her name is Courtney Clenney. She had 2 million followers, a $10,000 a month penthouse, and a boyfriend named Christian who came home that afternoon with sandwiches. He never left. To understand what happened on April 3, 2022, you need to go back to where this all started, because the story of Courtney and Christian does not begin with a knife. It begins with 2 people who met during a pandemic and built something that looked like a dream from the outside and looked like something entirely different from the inside. Christian Obumseli was born in Dallas, Texas in 1994. His family called him Toby. He was a linebacker, played college football at Abilene Christian University before transferring to Texas Tech to study engineering. By everyone who knew him, warm, soft-spoken, full of life, the kind of person who walked into a room and made it better. He moved to Miami and built a career in cryptocurrency, an industry that in 2021 was making certain people very wealthy very fast. But before that, success came. In November 2020, Christian was laid off during the pandemic, financially vulnerable, starting over. And that is when he met Courtney Clenney. Courtney was born in Texas in 1996. From a young age, she wanted to be a performer. She knew how to work a camera. She knew how to build an image. By her mid-20s, she had created something most influencers never achieve: a genuine mass audience. 2 million followers on Instagram, fitness modeling, a curated life that looked aspirational from every possible angle. And then, OnlyFans. In 2020 alone, Courtney earned more than $900,000 on the platform. And then in 2021, $1,800,000 in a single year. She was 25 years old. She had ambitions too. People who knew her said she wanted to be the next Kim Kardashian. She wanted to parlay the following into something bigger, something permanent. And for a while, Christian seemed like part of that picture. They met in Austin. They fell for each other. And in January 2022, they moved together into the One Paraiso building in Miami, a luxury high-rise in the Edgewater neighborhood. Their apartment on the 22nd floor had a view of Biscayne Bay. It cost $10,000 a month, funded entirely by Courtney's income. From the outside, a glamorous couple living a glamorous life. From the inside, something was already very wrong. The problems did not start in Miami. They started before. In July 2021, months before they even moved to Miami, Courtney was arrested in Las Vegas at the Cosmopolitan Hotel for domestic battery against Christian. Let that land. She was arrested for attacking him in a hotel room in Las Vegas over a year before he died. The charge existed. It was documented. And the relationship continued. Then they moved to Miami. And the building, the One Paraiso, quickly became aware that something volatile was happening on the 22nd floor. Security staff documented loud arguments. Neighbors complained. Tenants 2 floors above them could hear the screaming and crashing from their apartment. And then the elevator footage came out. February 2022, 2 months before Christian's death. Building surveillance cameras caught Courtney and Christian fighting inside one of the elevators. On camera, Courtney shoving him, hitting him. In the weeks that followed, she allegedly slashed his face. And then things got even darker. Because Christian, at some point during this period, had started keeping his own record. In text messages saved to his iCloud account, Christian documented what he said was happening to him. In 2021, he wrote that Courtney had stabbed him in the leg, that she had hit him so hard he thought he might have a concussion. He was writing it down, keeping evidence of what was happening to him. Nobody knew what to do with that information yet. By late March 2022, Courtney had apparently decided she was done. She told friends she no longer wanted to be with Christian, said he was not who people thought he was. They broke up. She kicked him out of the apartment. He left. But on April 1st, just 2 days later, Christian moved back in. Whatever had broken between them, they were trying again. Or at least, that is what it looked like. April 2nd, police were called to the One Paraiso again. A disturbance. Officers arrived and reportedly found Courtney intoxicated. She asked police for a restraining order against Christian, claiming he stalked her. Christian later returned to the apartment. They seemed to make peace. April 3rd was supposed to be a normal day. At 1:15 in the afternoon, Christian left the apartment. He came back at 4:33 p.m. He brought sandwiches for both of them. At 4:43 p.m., Courtney called her mother. They spoke for 6 minutes. According to what her mother would later tell investigators, she could hear Courtney in the background telling Christian to leave the apartment, accusing him of lying. Courtney called her mother again at 4:49 p.m. Another 7 minutes. At 4:57 p.m., she called 911. On the recording, Christian can be heard in the background, saying he was dying, saying he was losing feeling in his arm. Courtney can be heard saying, "I'm so sorry. Baby, I'm so sorry." Police arrived at 5:04 p.m. They found Courtney drenched in blood, cradling Christian's body on the floor. He was still alive. Paramedics arrived. They worked on him. Christian Obumseli was declared dead at Jackson Memorial Hospital. He was 27 years old. He had come home with sandwiches. Courtney told investigators what happened. She said Christian had grabbed her by the throat, shoved her against a wall. She ran to the kitchen. She grabbed a knife, and from approximately 10 feet away, she threw it at him. She never meant to stab him, she said. She was just trying to stop him. The medical examiner looked at Christian's wound, and the findings did not match Courtney's story. The wound to Christian's chest was 3 inches deep. It had punctured the subclavian artery on the right side of his chest. The medical examiner concluded that wound was consistent with a forceful downward strike, not with a knife thrown from 10 feet away. A thrown knife does not carry that kind of penetrating force at that distance. The physics, according to the chief medical examiner for Miami-Dade County, simply do not work. Police also noted something else. When they arrived at the scene, there was no visible evidence that Courtney had been physically harmed. No marks, no injuries consistent with being grabbed by the throat and thrown to the floor. Christian was dead with a 3-inch wound to his chest. Courtney was covered in his blood, but not injured herself. Courtney was not arrested that night. This is where Christian's family began to lose their minds. And honestly, you can understand why. After the 911 call, after the police arrived, after Christian's body was removed from the 22nd floor, Courtney went home. The death was being treated as a potential self-defense situation. Investigators said they needed to gather more evidence before making any decisions. Within days, Courtney's mother sent her a text message. At 5:25 p.m. on the day Christian died, the text mentioned self-defense and told Courtney not to say anything to investigators without an attorney. Courtney flew to Hawaii. She was there for weeks. Her team described it as rehabilitation, treatment for trauma, substance abuse, and post-traumatic stress disorder related to the incident. Christian's family was watching all of this, watching the woman who killed their son fly to Hawaii, watching nothing happen. Christian's family's attorney stood in front of cameras and said they had always believed that with a thorough investigation, justice would come. They were waiting for it. 4 months passed. And then in August 2022, Courtney Clenney was arrested in Hawaii, charged with second-degree murder with a deadly weapon, denied bond, extradited to Florida. She has been in a Miami jail ever since. Now here is where this case goes completely off the rails. Because the years between Courtney's arrest and her trial have produced a sequence of events that almost no one could have predicted. It starts with her parents. In February 2024, Kim and Courtney Clenney were arrested, charged with unauthorized access to a computer. What happened was this. After Christian's death, when police had finished processing the apartment, they left behind his personal laptop. They never seized it. Courtney's parents took it. And then, according to investigators, they began trying to get into it. Text messages recovered by police showed the family and members of their legal team actively discussing how to guess Christian's password, what they might find inside, how they could access the device. Courtney's parents were charged alongside their daughter. The family was now facing criminal charges as a unit. Those charges were eventually dropped, but only because a judge ruled that investigators had improperly accessed attorney-client privileged communications in the process of building their case against the parents. The way the evidence was gathered was itself a legal problem, so the charges disappeared. But the image of Courtney's parents sitting in their home in Texas trying to crack open the dead man's laptop, that image does not disappear. Then came the iCloud battle. Prosecutors discovered that Courtney shared a family iCloud account with her parents, and they wanted access to it. They believed that account contained communications between Courtney, her parents, and potentially others that were directly relevant to the case. The defense fought back hard, accused prosecutors of conducting a fishing expedition, of going far beyond what was legally justified. The argument went to Judge Andrea Wolfson, and she ultimately restricted the prosecution's access, limiting what they could see to data from April 2021 to August 2022, the period covering the relationship and the arrest. But even that compromise did not end the fight. Prosecutors pushed back on the limitations. The defense pushed back on any access at all. In the middle of all of this, in March 2026, Judge Wolfson looked at both legal teams and said words that have since been quoted everywhere. This is not going to be a telenovela. And yet, every hearing, it somehow becomes more dramatic. Then the secret recordings. This is the detail that stops people in their tracks. During their relationship, Christian had been recording Courtney inside their apartment, without her knowledge. Audio recordings, private conversations. Whatever was happening in that penthouse, he was capturing it. Prosecutors wanted those recordings played for the jury. They believed the audio would establish the true nature of what was happening between them, the dynamic, the aggression, what Courtney actually said and did when no one was supposed to be listening. Those recordings reportedly included Courtney screaming racial slurs at Christian, attacking him verbally in ways that would show the jury exactly who was doing what in that apartment. The defense argued those recordings were illegal, captured without consent in a private residence in violation of Florida law. The judge agreed. The recordings were suppressed. The jury will never hear them. Whatever Christian captured, whatever he was trying to document for his own protection, it is now gone from this case forever. But the most extraordinary moment of this entire pre-trial period came in October 2024. Courtney's defense team brought in an expert, Dr. John Maracchini, and they asked him to answer one central question. Is it physically possible for a knife thrown from 10 feet away to cause the wound that killed Christian Obumseli? His answer was yes. And to prove it, they conducted an experiment. They hung a pig carcass against a wall, because pig skin and tissue, according to the defense expert, behave similarly to human skin and tissue, and they had a man throw knives at it, repeatedly, on video. That video was played in open court. 6 knives were thrown at the pig carcass. Several successfully impaled it. One penetrated 5 inches deep. Dr. Maracchini stood in front of the camera, examined the wounds, and declared them similar to the injury that killed Christian. The defense said, "There. Proof. A thrown knife, can do this. Courtney's story is physically possible. Prosecutors immediately pointed out the flaw. The man throwing knives in the video was larger than Courtney, more physically powerful. His throwing force cannot be compared to hers. And the setup, the distance, the angle, the position, was designed by the defense to support their own theory. Christian's family attorney, Larry Handfield, stood outside the courthouse and said what many people were thinking. There is no way, no common-sense way, that a thrown knife lands 3 inches deep in a downward position in someone's chest. The judge deferred ruling on the evidence until she could review body cam footage from the night of the incident. A pig carcass, in a murder trial, in Miami, in 2024. This case. Courtney's parents, despite their own legal troubles, have stood by her completely. They gave interviews. They appeared on camera. And they said something that has stayed with people. If this hadn't happened, it would be her funeral we were talking about. They believe their daughter was the real victim, that Christian was abusive, that Courtney had no choice. Christian's family sees it entirely differently. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Courtney, against the One Paraíso building and its management, arguing that the building knew about the ongoing domestic violence from their many documented complaints and did nothing to intervene. They are fighting on 2 fronts simultaneously, criminal and civil. And Christian's family has raised something else that sits underneath this entire case. Christian Obumseli was a black man. Courtney Clenney is a white woman. His family has questioned openly whether Courtney received preferential treatment in those first 4 months. Whether the fact that she was a wealthy white influencer meant she got to fly to Hawaii for treatment while their son's death went uncharged. That question has never been fully answered. There is also one more thing that almost nobody has reported on. After everything that happened, after Christian died, after she was arrested and jailed, Courtney purchased a $1.4 million home in Austin, Texas. She never lived in it. She has been in jail. But the purchase happened while she was sitting in a Miami detention facility awaiting trial for the murder of the man she says she loved. Somebody bought a $1.4 million house. Make of that what you will. And while all of this was playing out in the courtroom, prosecutors were quietly building something else entirely. Something called Williams Rule witnesses. In Florida law, a Williams Rule witness is someone from outside the case who can testify about a defendant's prior bad acts. Not to say they are a bad person, but to establish a pattern, a documented, repeated pattern of the same behavior. Prosecutors identified 15 to 16 of these witnesses, people who, based on what investigators found, could take that stand and tell the jury about other times, other incidents, other moments where Courtney's behavior followed the same pattern they are alleging in Christian's death. Who are these witnesses? Their identities have not been made fully public, but the implication is significant. Prosecutors believe there are enough people with enough documented experiences to show the jury that what happened on April 3, 2022 was not a one-time explosion. It was the end point of a pattern that stretched back further than anyone has fully reported. Getting those witnesses to show up has been a problem. In early 2026, prosecutors told the judge that 15 to 16 scheduled depositions had simply not appeared. The people they subpoenaed did not come. Judge Wolfson was not impressed. She looked at the prosecution and said, "There is going to come a time when it is fish or cut bait," meaning, get your witnesses or move on. The trial has been partly delayed because of this witness problem, but as of June 2026, prosecutors say they are getting it done. Whatever those witnesses have to say, the jury is going to hear it. Then there is the matter of the prosecutor who had to leave the case entirely. Courtney's defense team spent years arguing that the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office had committed misconduct, that prosecutors had accessed privileged legal communications, Essentially, that they had seen Courtney's defense strategy when they had no legal right to do so. The motion to disqualify the entire state attorney's office from the case failed. The prosecution stayed on. But one prosecutor, one assistant state attorney, did withdraw from the case entirely. Quietly. Without full public explanation. And Courtney's attorney cited this withdrawal as evidence that something was wrong inside the prosecution. That the misconduct they had been alleging was real enough to force someone out. The state attorney's office disputed that framing entirely. They said the withdrawal was routine, that it meant nothing. But it happened. A prosecutor walked away from this case midstream, and nobody has given a fully satisfying explanation for why. Here is something else that tends to get lost in all the drama around Courtney. There was a moment, caught on camera, shortly after Christian was stabbed. Police body cam footage recorded Courtney in the immediate aftermath, covered in blood, hysterical, begging Christian to wake up. She said, "I need him. He was my other half." And in another recorded moment from that same footage, she asked, "Is he dead?" Two things can be true at the same time in this case. Courtney could have genuinely loved Christian, and Courtney could still be responsible for his death. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And that complexity, that emotional reality, is exactly what makes this case so hard for a jury to navigate. Because jurors are human. They will watch a woman covered in blood begging her boyfriend to survive, and some of them will struggle to reconcile that image with the word murderer. The prosecution knows this. It is why the elevator footage and the medical examiner's findings are so central to their case. They need to show the jury not just what happened on April 3rd, but everything that came before it. Let's talk about what second-degree murder actually means. Because this charge, and what prosecutors have to prove, matters enormously for what happens in that courtroom in August. Second-degree murder in Florida does not require premeditation. The prosecution does not have to prove Courtney planned to kill Christian in advance. What they have to prove is that she acted with what the law calls a depraved mind, an act so dangerous, so reckless in its disregard for human life, that it crossed from accident or self-defense into murder. The prosecution's argument is built on this, that Courtney's documented history of violence against Christian, the Las Vegas arrest, the elevator footage, the face slashing, the messages Christian wrote about being stabbed in the leg, all of it establishes that this was not a terrified woman acting in a moment of fear. This was a person with a depraved and reckless pattern who on April 3rd took it too far. Courtney's defense will argue the opposite. That self-defense is an absolute legal defense in Florida. That if Courtney genuinely believed she was in danger of serious harm, she had the right to defend herself. And that the burden is on the prosecution to disprove that belief beyond a reasonable doubt. Florida's self-defense law is one of the strongest in the country. If the jury believes, even partially, that Courtney feared for her life in that moment, they may have no choice but to acquit. That is why this case is so genuinely difficult to predict, not because the facts are unclear, but because the law leaves significant room for interpretation. And 12 strangers are going to have to agree. Trial is now set for August 2026. 4 years after Christian Obumseli came home with sandwiches and never left that apartment alive. 2 stories are going to walk into that courtroom. Courtney's team will tell the jury she was a domestic violence victim, that the relationship was mutual in its violence, that the recordings Christian made, the ones the jury will never hear, were themselves an example of his controlling behavior. That on April 3rd, a terrified woman did what she had to do to survive. Prosecutors will show the jury the elevator footage, the documented pattern of Courtney's violence, the Las Vegas arrest, the medical examiner's findings about what that wound actually required to be inflicted. And they will remind the jury that when police arrived, Christian was dying on the floor and Courtney had not a single mark on her. and they will bring the jury back to one question. If Courtney threw that knife from 10 feet away, how did it go 3 inches into Christian Obumseli's chest and pierce his heart? That question is going to hang in that courtroom every single day of this trial. Christian brought home sandwiches. He walked back through that door, and he never walked out again. Subscribe to the Untold case, because when this trial begins in August, we will cover every detail as it happens.